Hello, hello, and welcome to the User Research Strategist podcast. I am your host, Nikki Anderson, and I am joined here by MP, which maybe we have to get into that nickname in a minute, but we are, going to talk about something really cool and exciting. But before we dive in, do you mind just giving a quick introduction, please?
Of course. Thanks so much for having me, Nikki. So I'm MP, or Mindaugas, full name. I'm the founder of Coho. I've been building design communities for the last decade in many different shapes or forms. Although I fell in love with design or discovered design as a design recruiter back in 2014, and that kind of led me down this weird and wonderful path of just talking to designers for the last 10 years, thousands of them. And now I'm building essentially an easier way for senior professionals to make better decisions. And we can talk about what that looks like too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited. So we were talking earlier about how the role of UX is kind of changing in org structures and, what the role might evolve into. And that's the topic that we're going to chat about today, which I'm so excited because I know that people feel like they're in really difficult positions with trying to make decisions or do certain things that they might not have the knowledge, skills, expertise about. So why don't we get started by kind of hearing your thoughts on what's happening? Like, how is the role evolving, changing? How is this org structure evolving and changing?
Yeah, I think what I'm seeing, at least in my conversations, and even in my own work, right? We're an early stage company, small team. Like I think about years ago or how we built companies over the last few decades. It was always like the more revenue you make, the more customers you have, the more people you need. And like personally, and I know a lot of other founders, CEOs feel the same, where you're like, yes, but I just want to build something great and build something big, but I don't necessarily want to hire, scale. Like I don't want to run a company of 10,000 people. Like I don't. I just want to be in my own little team, right? But still want to build something big. And so I think what we're seeing, what's happening now is, there's been conversations of like the talent stack is collapsing, but what I'm seeing is like the org chart is collapsing alongside that too. And so with AI, you'll see, at least personally, larger companies, because of course, what is the purpose of a company? To make profit. So if AI starts becoming really good and permeating, I think you're going to see large companies potentially starting to shrink because, okay, can they start, replacing entire departments or whatever roles with AI? That means maybe shrink. Okay, maybe we'll see new roles being created and that will change, but we don't know that. And then my suspicion is that we'll see a lot more smaller companies building big things.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that does is you no longer might not need VPs. And the people who traditionally say we're those who are making all those strategic decisions and then passing down the work to everybody else, now you are going to be much closer to the work. So you're going to have to do the work and also make the decisions. And at least in my conversations, what I'm noticing is that is already starting to happen, where you're jumping from you're no longer jumping from like a senior lead, principal, whatever, to then director. It's kind of like, hey, you're a lead designer, but you're also making director level decisions now because there's no director. And so I think that's having, an interesting kind of change or implication to how we operate as professionals, how we need to close that gap much quicker in terms of our knowledge. But then if you really think about it, there's also no playbook for what's happening right now. So can you Google, like, how do I do some type of a management or decision-making course or whatever? Maybe, but is it going to be relevant for what we're dealing with right now? Probably not.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that a lot of people are finding themselves in really weird positions, kind of what you're talking about, okay, you're a lead, but you're making director level decisions. And I know like a lot of like junior mid-level researchers who are sitting there looking at some career frameworks being like, why am I doing like senior lead stuff? And like I'm the only researcher, so I guess I have no choice kind of like vibe, or I'm the only UXer, so that I'm like forced to do all of these other things that I haven't had the experience to do. And I'm not sure how much, let's say, like knowledge there is coming from above that's actually helping people. And so I'm wondering from the conversations that you've been having within that gap that we have of like somebody who might be a lead but making director level decisions, and then we have AI on top of that, and is AI going to steal all of our jobs? What what would you recommend be something that people start to think about or do aside from the Googling, like, how the hell do I make a director level decision?
It's a good question. I think it's hard to parse through like what are you supposed to do, but I always go back to thinking about the most successful people and how they operate. And I find that the most, or at least the people I've been around who I, let's say, deem as, successful, don't pretend that they're the smartest person in the room. What they tend to do, though, as an actionable thing, is they are observing different perspectives. So they're listening to other people, usually in kind of a smaller group scenario, right? If you go and scroll through LinkedIn, like, right, it's where you're all just shouting at each other. How are you meant to parse and distill like whose opinion matters?
Yeah.
But I think the people that I see operate or navigate different changes, they will usually go and talk to a few different people that maybe they trust or they feel or they deem trustworthy enough to pay attention to. They'll take in a bunch of perspectives and they're also willing to change their opinion based on the new information that they've learned. So that is quite an actionable thing. Like if you are kind of stuck right now and kind of going, okay, I need to make this decision on something or whatever that may be, don't go Googling things. Don't go reading Reddit or LinkedIn, right? Because who even knows, like at this point, who's saying what? Think of like a few people who who can just give you, different perspectives. I've gotten into a habit of doing the same. If I'm unsure about something, I have like a few people, 4 or 5 people that I can just DM on WhatsApp. And I'm like, hey, I'm stuck on this. And they'll just give me an opinion or a perspective or whatever that may be.
Yeah, it's kind of like you have a board of directors for your career.
A little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm curious, for people who might feel isolated, especially in their role, either because they don't maybe have colleagues that they can trust or, COVID working from home, oh, I haven't really networked. How do you go about like finding those trustworthy people and building that network of 4 or 5 people that you would feel comfortable talking to about
Mm.
stuff?
I think it's engaging with people in an authentic way and not necessarily expecting something in return. So what kind of we're I think about this a lot because I was born in the 80s, right? So I've seen like the early internet or how we used to, meet people back in the day or get jobs or whatever. That all has changed, and what the internet has done and social media especially is like it's made everybody accessible in a way,
Mhm.
but it's done this really weird thing where we now, because I can DM pretty much anybody or email pretty much anybody, we assume that that person should give us their time. And so what we do is we always lead with an ask. Like we reach out to somebody and we're like, hey, can you do this thing for me? And I'm kind of looking at that message going like, you are who? Like I always go back to like, okay, I have bills to pay. You expect me to drop everything I'm doing for some random DM? No. And I can give you an example. One of the people that I DM right now for any, like he's probably sick of me at this point, but we've become friends. And I initially identified him as someone years ago that I wanted to like build a relationship with, just because he's a great founder, he's built and sold a bunch of companies, but he's very honest about how he operates, the failures, the successes. And I cold emailed him a bunch of times years ago, never got a response, right? But then a couple of years ago, somehow I was organizing some, there was like some type of a mutual connection, and I was organizing a dinner in Lisbon, and I was like, hey, I believe you're in town. You want to join us, right? So instead of reaching out and asking for something, I was like, here's like, hey, I'm curating this group of interesting people, come along. And through that, we met, and I was telling you we had a joke. I was like, dude, I used to email you like years ago, like absolutely dumb stuff, And through that, we kind of became friends. But again, it was like a mutual exchange of value initially. And now he's one of those first people that I will DM right for the trickiest challenges. So kind of authentically trying to find those people. So again, there are folks on LinkedIn, for example, engage in conversation, ask interesting questions. One of the things that nobody does anymore, and it's literally the simplest and the most powerful way to start a conversation, is find someone you respect, their work, maybe they wrote something, whatever it is, send them a DM and say, I appreciated what you designed, built, wrote, but leave it at that. Because everybody usually follows up with an ask, right? Because that's like, oh, I'll hook you in with something nice to say, and then I'm going to ask you for something. Because nobody does that. I ran a kind of like live cold emailing or outreach workshop a couple of years ago. And I was like, hey, let's do this live. And I cold DM'd the founder and CEO of Linear. We're like, he's got tens of thousands of followers, right? And I just said, I really respect how you're building the company because I did appreciate their stance on like, how they ship product, how they raise their money and all of this. So I appreciate that. And that's all I said. Literally less than 24 hours later, responded saying, thank you. I appreciate this message. All right. And what that does is, hey, like maybe in a year, 2 years, whatever that may be, maybe I do have an ask to make. And when I go to DM, when he opens that DM, guess what he sees is a positive interaction previously. And so your chances of now engaging and maybe getting to that ask are like 100 times more realistic.
I love that. And I think that that's such a great example. And it's also something that I had done before and also I'm on the receiving end of because I get sent a lot of resumes and attached resumes of can you please review this of people who I've never spoken to before. But the people who I am more likely to engage with and help or send resources to have reached out to me before with no ask, being like, thank you so much for like this article. It really resonated with me. And I'm like, oh, that means a lot to me, and then if they ever ask me anything, I'm more likely to be like, okay, let me see how I can help. That's awesome. Yeah, that's such a great reminder and piece of advice. Like, don't always start with the ask. And it might take longer to cultivate these relationships, but they're so
Sure.
much more meaningful.
Yeah. And especially if you're, I do it now just personally, randomly, right? But that's how I kind of built the last 10 years of my career. Like I have no business knowing the people that I know right now, like zero. If you knew where I started, like I have zero business. But that was through that. So I don't do it intentionally. But again, if you are looking for work, if you are, trying to solve some type of a problem, be intentional about it. Set aside, if you're going to spend a few hours a week applying for jobs, well, take an hour from that and just reach out to a few folks, right? And just say hi, say something nice, something you appreciate and admire, and that's it. Move on, and then you'll start noticing these people replying. And if you do that every week for an hour, it starts compounding.
Do you want to get all of your user research questions answered all while hanging out on your couch in sweatpants? No need to join any live webinars and hope that your question gets answered. No need to Google a million different things and sift through some scattered advice that you don't really know is valid or reliable. Not anymore. I know it sounds too good to be true, but I promise it isn't, because if you become a paid Substack subscriber, you get access immediately to a community filled with user researchers that I am in every single day answering questions. Not only can you hang out on your couch, feel less alone as a user researcher, and get all of your questions answered, not only by an expert, but by a bunch of other user researchers with amazing perspectives and experience, you can do all of that on your couch in sweatpants, and I will be alongside there with you every step of the way. So join my paid Substack, get immediate access, and we can relax together solving all of your user research problems. See you there.
I want to switch topics slightly to talk about your community and building like communities with people who are in lead positions and trying to help them with making decisions. And I'm curious, like, can you talk through a little bit about what sparked that interest for you of starting something like this, and then, what it looks like and how you help?
Yeah, so right now I'll kind of give you a little bit of background. When I discovered design as a recruiter, I fell in love with design, but also I fell in love with designers as a community too, and people. Something, I don't know, maybe I was a designer in a past life. I mean, here I am wearing black at this point, right? I've morphed into a designer now. I'm always, looking at like hotel taps and light switches. I'm grumbling about the UX of all of those things at this point. So like, yeah, I'm a grumpy UXer now. That's all right.
We all are to a certain degree, to be fair.
It's true. But I was never like that before until I started hanging around with designers. But what happened was I fell in love with that, and I actually, through my recruiting work, I started noticing that I was enjoying more the community aspect of it and the building. And then I got lucky and I joined InVision back before Figma came and ate our lunch. But I got to build community on a global stage and meet a lot of designers from all over the world. And I started noticing started noticing patterns of people running into very specific challenges when they hit a certain career point.
Mhm.
And that started to like make me super curious. And then naturally I would ask like, okay, but when you're encountering these challenges, like surely, like where do you go to solve them? And I wasn't hearing like a clear answer anywhere. And I started thinking about, okay, well, would it look like to start, solving and maybe bringing these folks together in groups and kind of curated groups and surrounding them with all these resources and blah, blah, blah. And then I ended up joining a company called On Deck, and we were building kind of a professional membership paid community fellowship type thing. But again, my thinking kept evolving over the last couple of years. And what I noticed what was missing, or first like that kind of career decision, work decision problem started becoming more apparent. The way to help people navigate through that usually is like traditionally masterminds or peer groups are one of the most powerful ways to do it. What I noticed though, there's nothing really exists that does it at scale, but also at an accessible price that works, right? Executives have YPO, like Young Presidents Organization. They pay thousands a year. Chief is for women executives, right? Again, thousands a year. But there's nothing for that layer of like senior to say head of, manager, director level that could bring these folks together at scale, really focus on the quality of the matching, but also you don't have to pay 10,000 a year. And so I set about figuring out, could this be productized in some way and what would it look like? And started thinking about it maybe like 2 years ago, but really building like a few months ago. So we're super early right now. We're like super semi-productized at this point. There's a lot of like, when companies sell like AI, there's usually like the founder behind the scenes, like just, doing stuff. But I think we're on to something here. And the other thing we probably want to do is start opening up some of those decisions or the solutions that are being talked about in a search of some sorts. Now, there's like anonymity and all of that, right? But you can do those things. But I think there's something there.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I, as like a fellow community builder, I get that feeling of like wanting to bring people together who are like in similar places and similar struggles to help them kind of work through that really muddled part of career, because like there's so many resources on like almost like junior stuff, like here's how you start out and here's how you start to grow, and then it's like, and good luck, like good luck making the big decisions that nobody seems to talk about out loud. And so I'm curious, like, what are some of the sticking points that you found? Like, where are those like tough points in people's careers?
As soon as I think you hit like, let's say you become a senior designer, you've been a senior designer maybe for like 3, 4, 5 years.
Yep.
You then hit that point. Okay, where do I go from here? And then what tends to happen, no matter which way you go, whatever, let's say you become a lead designer or a staff designer, or whatever the progression looks like, each lead brings new questions, new challenges that you haven't dealt with before. Immediately. I always like to think about this. Imagine if instead of when you update your LinkedIn profile, like you put up an update on LinkedIn, hey, like I got promoted. instead of getting like 1,000 congratulations, because that's what we get, and that's nice little dopamine hit. What if you, because we can predict what type of challenges you're already encountering, right, with that promotion, what if you got a list of curated peers to connect with, resources that you're likely going to need immediately, right? Because that's what people need. They immediately, when they hit that promotion, they're like, all right, so now I'm gonna have to deal with some stuff. I don't know where to begin, right? And that becomes even more, I think, apparent now, as we talked about at the beginning. New roles are being created. Org charts are now being ripped up when you before maybe like, okay, well, I don't have to deal with all of this stuff because there's a director, there's a VP somewhere. They're just gonna pass stuff down to us. Well, guess what? They don't exist anymore. And now it's you, right? And so new roles are being created. I talked to somebody the other week and they said they just got promoted to a new role. And what happened there was the role is a lead role. That person has now become the most senior designer within the company overnight. The CEO is who's an engineer, pulled design out from reporting to PM to product and now reporting directly to the CEO. And then the role is a 40-60 split where 40% is leading the team, 60% IC work.
Oof. Yeah.
And the person ended that by saying, there's no playbook for this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're going to see more of that happening.
Yeah. And I think that something that's also what I'm seeing that kind of resonates is where you used to have that like hierarchy and chain. So things would come down. So like, let's say you're a lead and you had a director above you. So you would learn.
Yeah.
Or a senior director above, you would learn. A VP above, you would learn. And now those things that you might have learned in the past from people are now completely theoretical and somewhere in some job description that's probably written by AI and copied and pasted from every other job description that there ever is in the whole history of the world, which says the same
Right.
stuff that makes no sense. So yeah, I think a lot of people are like, not only like, am I without a playbook? I'm without any sort of guidance. I'm also like just without understanding what my own role is and can be. And then that comes on top of what if I don't do something right that I don't even know that I'm supposed to be doing?
100%. And so then you're faced with these decisions, right? That if you make the wrong move, then it's not only your going to impact your own career, but also could be potentially a critical business decision too,
Yeah.
which is something that if you think about the profiles or the folks who are starting to find themselves in these situations more and more, they've been focusing on their craft.
Yeah.
Maybe, okay, I've been to a conference, I've read, blog posts, what these folks in these positions, the folks that make those decisions, what they deal with. And all of a sudden, you're doing that.
No more reading. Now you're doing.
Right now you're doing, and then there's nowhere to kind of go and say, okay, but how do I, like, how do I, right? That's what I'm starting to hear from folks. And like, if my personal thesis is correct, there will be a lot more of that happening, right? Because you'll have a lot more smaller teams, companies, and even, I mean, I hear this, I scan whatever Twitter and Threads and LinkedIn, and you see that from VCs who, especially if it's the big VCs, if they start spouting those theses, like, it impacts how founders then structure the companies. And I'm starting to see a lot more conversations of people saying startups or CEOs, even like later stage, are actively saying delaying senior hires so they can hire more people to do the doing.
Yeah.
So then where's the middle layer to make those? Because the CEO, the founder, is not going to be able to make all of those decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like the middle layer has been cut out quite a lot. You talk about like middle management and like that used to be such a thing in like the 90s, like, oh, you have your middle managers and now it's just kind of like, oh, where are they? Oh, it's me,
It's you, exactly. Right. And the problem is that we can say, oh, but like that might not happen, that won't happen. When you hear, and I'm pretty sure that Mark Zuckerberg said this at Meta like sometime last year, we're gonna get rid of the middle management. So if the CEO of Meta says this, well, then you have all the smaller companies, the founders who are maybe the fanboys or whatever, because we follow trends. they're going to be like, oh, well, if Mark's doing it,
Hey.
hey, now you're now the manager. Like, you just said.
Yeah. 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 Like the whole like, okay, you can lead the team and make all these big decisions and also do your craft. I think that's one of the hardest places to be is like in that split.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I could tell you, I read like we're on a wait list right now. We're like in a closed alpha, let's say, and we'll open up for a larger beta in a couple months. But on the sign up form, I ask like, why, like, what problem are you trying to solve, basically? And if I was to read you some of those answers, it'll literally be what we just talked about. And somebody signed up earlier and they just framed it so well. Like I nearly want to just stick it on the landing page where he said, like, I'm still relatively new to the industry. I've had like a few years experience, but I find myself in a lead position all of a sudden. And now he said, I need to work across teams. I need to make sure the product is their launch is successful. And he said, I need access to others who are making better decisions than me.
So great. Yes. I understand why you want to copy and paste that.
Right? And I was just like, do I just email him and say like, hey, can I just quote you?
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's amazing. And I think that when you said, on LinkedIn you can get your 1,000 likes and congratulations, but that's not going to help you. It's like, what's that list of resources that I actually need access to people who can who are making better decisions, or maybe are in the same boat trying to figure out which decisions to make that. So there's camaraderie, there's something to get, there's a togetherness when you feel alone.
Yeah. And I think whenever we talk about like tactical advice that, forget what I'm building, I'll build it for everybody at one point. It's more if you're sitting there kind of stuck, like that is the most effective. Who are 2 or 3 people that are, we most of us have them,
Yeah.
that even if you deem them, we always think like, oh, I need an expert. I need somebody, no, message even somebody who is like younger than you, has less experience, just even thinking through those problems out loud, or just somebody. This happened to me like yesterday. I'm working on a deck right now, and I'm trying to frame it, and I'm just like I'm hitting a wall. I'm not really great at copy, and I find English is also not my first language, and I find I hit like a wall or limitations on how I can articulate things, and I just pinged a friend who is not even anything related to the industry or whatever I'm doing. And I was like, hey, how do you understand this? And the way he framed it, I was like, oh my,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so just doing that,
Yeah.
instead of like scrolling through LinkedIn and being probably going down, getting into some rabbit hole of like interacting with crap that is literally not going to help you right now.
Yeah.
'Cause I'm guilty of this.
Me too.
Just like message somebody, don't overthink it. Just be like, hey, I'm dealing with this thing. What do you think? Have you dealt with this? I'm thinking about it this way.
Yeah. Oh, that's perfect. Because I was going to ask you about your one piece of advice, and we got it. We
That's
nailed
it.
it.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah. No, no, that's like literally perfect. It was the best timing ever. So really looking at those 2 to 3 people, think outside the box, because like as you said, somebody younger, like, or somebody adjacent to you, or somebody in a completely different field, different perspective, you can open your mind to so many different things. So I love
Yeah,
that.
we tend to overthink it. We think, okay, I need to go find a mentor or something. There is, and yes, those things are of course beneficial, but they can take time to get to that right person, right? Just message someone,
Mhm.
anyone.
Yeah. Yeah. Get some perspective. Get
Yeah,
unstuck. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. Thank you so much. This was such a fun conversation. I feel like that we covered so much amazing stuff. There's a bunch that people could take out of it. So I really, really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you.
No, thank you for inviting me. It was
Yeah,
fun.
cool. Well, huge thank you to everybody watching today. So thanks so much for your time. And yeah, looking forward to the next one, and we'll see you soon.